My name is Brandon Cardwell. I'm the executive director of an organization called the iGate Innovation Hub. We run an incubator and co-work space called The Switch, based out of Livermore, which is almost as cool as the space we're in right now. So, is anybody from Zoho here? No. Well, we'll thank them anyway. Zoho has been great to us. We asked if we could do an event in this space, and they didn't hesitate to allow us to come in here. And Bailey from Zoho was here earlier, but he's not now. But this is a great space, so thank you all for coming. I'm super excited about tonight's event for a couple of reasons, but mostly because when we started doing what we do at iGate 7 years ago, it was a pretty lonely existence. There was not a ton going on. And fast forward now 7 years later, the guy to my right, especially in Greg Hitchan, has been a huge part of growing the TriValley startup community, especially for us. I don't really know what he does, but we'll figure it out later, I guess. No, I'm just kidding. Dave Selinger's been a great mentor for me personally in thinking about the entrepreneurial experience out here in the TriValley and how it differs from other places. And I'm really excited to have TriValley Ventures represented, but also the serial entrepreneur perspective represented up here, and clearly a bunch of you are pretty excited about it too. So please join me in thanking both these guys for taking time out of their schedules for being here tonight.
We're good? We want to thank Brandon as well. He's tirelessly toiled away at building the ecosystem here in the TriValley, and it is a great resource for everybody. It's a place to start. Thank Pam and the city as well. They've always been supportive of these kind of efforts, where we get to expose serial entrepreneurs living in your backyard who've done some pretty incredible things to an interested audience trying to learn more. With that said, Dave Selinger, you want to do a little introduction? Love to hear a little bit about yourself and your background before we get into the innumerable companies you've founded and been involved with.
Cool. So you want the 5 or the 20-minute version?
5.
With the 25-minute version. So I'm Dave Selinger. I'm a technical person by trade. I have been programming computers since the early 80s. I taught myself to program in BASIC when I was about 6 years old. Really fell in love with computers because people, for whatever reason, didn't seem to understand me particularly well. And so then I kept programming. I learned about 13 or 14 languages over the course of the ensuing 10 years. I got to take courses at Johns Hopkins University. And for those of you that are under 30, I think you'll have a hard time understanding how hard it was to really learn how to program in these days. I grew up in a town of about 300 people. The library had a set of 6 books on how to program. I read all 6 of them by the time I was 8. And there just wasn't a lot. So it was much more of a kind of a new frontier type experience. It was super fun to do, but it was certainly kind of weird. I had the most supportive parents in the world. They were both physicians and immigrants, and so they had no idea what the heck I was doing, but they were really supportive the whole way through. I got to go to Stanford, which was also amazing. Going from a town of 300 where I was, kind of the smartest kid in the block to Stanford was a pretty big eye-opening experience. And then from there started a whole series of companies. My very first company was a coffee company. I partnered with a company up in Oregon called Dutch Brothers. Then I went to Amazon, Redfin, Relevance, and then most recently Deep Sentinel. Throughout all that, I've also started a number of nonprofits as well.
So I'd love to start with that journey. And you were doing data, correct me if I'm wrong, big data, whatever correct nomenclature is, at Amazon before it was cool. Can you start there in that entrepreneurial journey? What'd you do at Amazon? Why'd you leave?
Yeah, sure. So I actually started my first company before I went to Amazon. So the entrepreneurial spirit kind of it had gotten to me quite a bit before. In fact, I joined the founding team of a startup in 1997 in the first .com boom. And we'd raised $30 million and blown that. It turns out $30 million goes a lot quicker than you'd think if you have $500,000 parties. I have no idea. And so I started this coffee company, and I had no idea what it was going to become, but we were partnered with a brick and mortar at the time, which is this company called Dutch Brothers. If you watch Undercover Boss, they're actually on Undercover Boss. So my partner Travis is on there. And we built an e-commerce site and started selling these really high-end, niche-y coffee makers. And in that process, I discovered this really funky thing in 2001 called Google AdWords. And in 2001 was a really magical time because the world was just collapsing, so no one had marketing budget. And so I was really by myself buying AdWords. And so I would buy AdWords for these $300, $400 coffee makers for 50 cents a click. I'd get 50% conversion, so $1 for conversion, making over $120 per box, just literally printing money in a time period where no one really had any business model. So then I went back to Stanford after I dropped out, and I was bored. I was making enough money that I really didn't have to do anything, but I was bored. So I went to an Amazon interview, and I'm sitting across the table, just kind of like, feet up on the table. I thought I was like the biggest shit in the world. And I'm telling the story about how my coffee company's working to this guy named Neil Roseman, who is a VP of Consumer. And I get to that point where I say, yeah, so I'm paying like 50 cents a click, I get 50% conversion, and so I make like $120, 5-10 times a day. It's pretty sweet. And he's like, what? Walk me through those economics one more time. And to kind of give you a sense of the power of Amazon, here's how I'm going to get to this. That interview happened in November. By June, Amazon was running a $100 million run rate through a scaled up version of that exact same idea. Right, so in the course of 8 months, we went from spending almost no money on Google to being Google's first $100 million customer and teaching Google how to build an automated AdWords system. And so that's really the premise of what made Amazon amazing back then and amazing now, is that Jeff Bezos drives based on these just incredibly data-driven principles. One of the things we used to say was, in trust in God and everyone else had better bring data. And what I loved about Jeff Bezos was that he was one of those few people where we all talk about being data-driven now. I don't know how many of you guys work at like big companies. And big companies all like to say they're data-driven, right? And if you bring your boss a really good idea backed by data, what does she or he do? Exactly nothing, right? And the difference with Jeff Bezos, and this is the kernel of what makes him and made him amazing, is he truly believes it. So he came from D.E. Shaw, which is a trading company in New York, and he went to the board of directors and said, look, I think that we can make money at the scale that we're at, which was about $10 billion a year at the time. I think that we can make money using our data in the same way that we did at D.E. Shaw. No one had done this before. And so he'd gone through this cycle of hiring PhDs from University of Washington and various places, and what he learned was essentially that PhDs, with all respect to those who have PhDs in the room, in this position of like no roadmap, did what PhDs do really well, was they analyze data and then produce charts. And it turns out that charts, when you show that the consumers, don't make money. And so he made this really, I think, bold decision to put this like hotshot kid who had gotten a C+ in statistics at Stanford in charge of a team of PhDs. And so I got to run that team. My predecessor was a fully accredited professor, and he walked out the door and I walked in the door, basically. And what was neat about getting to do that was we had the mantra of using data to make money in any way we wanted to. And again, today, this is a really common practice. You have these teams that consist of a data scientist and maybe a software engineer, a product manager. That had never happened before in the history of technology. The closest thing that we had were Wall Street quantitative traders, and we had fraud management teams. But no one really doing some combination of research, right? Because quantitative traders, really their output was their trade, which was fully quantitative. And in the case of fraud, the math they were using was all a type of mathematics called decision trees. And so there really wasn't a lot of this combination of research and execution. And so we got to build the first team that combined all of those different things. And to drive that point home, that team, within 2 years of us founding it, was driving over 25% of Amazon's profit 2 years later. And the basis of that, one of the key bases of that, which was really cool, was we did this algorithm, and it's a long answer to your question, by the way. I get longer too. We built this algorithm, we had this idea like, hey, if we show content on the homepage, you just looked at the TV, let's show you content like TV, right? It sounds smart, right? That's an obvious thing to do. So we built this thing, it was called KATE. It used a type of mathematics called Bayesian decision tree, Bayesian network for decisioning. And we thought it was really slick. It could predict what you clicked on really well in the offline modeling. And so we deployed it. And the guy who was responsible for deploying was a guy named Pat Rosmivishantong. He was a PhD from, I think, Cornell, actually. And he came in my office the next day, and he's a very kind of culturally Thai person. And he had just this look of stricken terror in his eyes. And he goes, Mr. Selly, I have horrible news. I have really, really horrible news. It's not statistically significant yet, but all the data suggests that we cannot predict anything about the consumer. And I was like, whoa, that sounds pretty bad. We spent about a year building this, and we told all the executive staff about it, and it doesn't work. And he's like, yeah. What we found was that if we show you a TV, it's less profitable than if we show you this random ad that we had in the content cycle. And that's because the ad was so much more profitable because Amazon's margins were only 6, 7, 8, 9, 10%. And I was like, fuck. Cool, so I'm gonna get fired tomorrow. And so we all went home. And in the middle of the night, I sat bolt upright. And I was like, holy shit, actually, did we just discover the single most profitable piece of content on Amazon's website? If we can, instead of trying to target non-advertising content, why don't we target ads? And so the next day I came in and we started running targeted ads. And I showed the results to Jeff Bezos about 3 weeks later. And he said, this is the dumbest idea I've ever seen. I was like, sweet. He's got my back. He said, we are not an advertising website. We do not make money by advertising. We sell high quality products at the lowest possible price to consumers. Our differentiators are selection and speed. And I said, ooh. So you asked me to find the best way to serve our customers and to make money. Can we keep working on this? And he said, well, here's the good news, is even though I hate this and I think it's the dumbest idea in the world, you've shown me data that shows that it's a smart idea. So I'm gonna let you keep going. And what I loved about that moment, right, like the last time, again, think about the last time your boss told you that they thought that you had the dumbest fucking idea they'd ever heard and was like, go ahead and do it. I mean, this dude was already a billionaire, right? He already owned a $100 million house in I think Beverly Hills at this point, right? Like, he did not need to do that, right? This is a 25, 26-year-old hotshot sitting in front of you who got a C+ in statistics showing you some data, but he did. And fast forward to last year, the predictions on that business unit that we discovered, the results that we were able to do is we were able to actually drive up conversion using advertising dollars. So we use specific types of ads to drive up conversion by making them relevant, showing offers to consumers. So we drive up conversion, and we were able to generate 25% of profit the next year. Last year, it's estimated that business unit did $4 billion in profit, and this year it's estimated to do $5 billion in profit. In 2004, when we launched that business unit was responsible, as far as I understand, for meeting their finances, for subsidizing all the price at Amazon and enabling them to compete with Walmart on price. So if you look at their margin, they supplemented it across the board on the units that mattered, and that's the exact 4-year window when they were growing this program. But they were able to gain share against Walmart. Walmart increased their margin from 22% to 27%, and Amazon grew 40%, 50%, 60% year over year by crushing them on price. And again, the key to that story is not my accomplishment. What I found really amazing about this and what became the foundation of data science and this culture that we're trying to build here and everywhere is this notion of data before ego. And I have still to this day not met anyone like Jeff Bezos who's willing to go to that degree, something that he hates, and still do it because of the data.
But what a great lesson that I'm assuming you've applied in other contexts as CEO and founder of your own companies after. Well, let's start there.
The good news is I'm smarter, so I don't do that at all. I'm usually right.
So after Amazon, you get involved with Redfin as a CTO and founder. Give us the story there. It's obviously a high-profile company now after the IPO. Love the perspective of one, not only what the founding story is, but as both an insider and now looking at it the outside over the last couple of years. What are your thoughts on what they're doing and a little story behind it?
Sure. So, yeah, I mean, there's just like a trillion different stories about the founding of Redfin. The first would be why I thought it was interesting, and that was that I was personally passionate about the space. I had started looking for a house in Seattle while I was at Amazon, and I had this conversation with my real estate agent, whom I met through a friend randomly one day, and he offered to show me some houses. And I found that I kind of naturally fell into this motion where he had become my real estate agent, kind of de facto. And so at some point I was like, Jesus, like I really don't know who this guy is, and I'm about to buy like a $700,000 or $800,000 house with him. Let me like take him to dinner and figure out who he is. And in the course of that dinner, I learned that he could barely do math, and he really had no freaking idea what houses were worth, and had no idea which one was right for me or how to do it. And so I was with my friend Lyle, and I'm sitting there at dinner with him. I was like, God, this is like super uncomfortable, because all I want to do is leave right now. And nice enough guy, but good God, right? I mean, the guy's gonna make on a $700,000 house, right? You bank 20 grand from the deal, right? Like that's not super bueno in my opinion, for doing very little and not even understanding what the heck I want, not understanding how to help me. And then we got into, I came back from the bathroom. I pulled my friend Lyle to the hall, and I was like, dude, like, this is whack. I don't know that we want to work with this guy. And he's like, well, let's make the best of it. And so we sat there, and I started asking him, like, how would you negotiate on my behalf? And I came to learn even more about how really ill-equipped this guy was for negotiating on my behalf. And it's like things like, well, we're going to do this. You write a letter about who you are. I was like, okay, great. So what are you doing again? And he's like, well, I'll give the letter to the real estate agent. It's like that scene in Office Space, right? Well, I don't actually bring the requirements from the printer to the engineers. My assistant does that. But what is it you do here? And it just got worse. And so after that, I started digging into why is it that real estate agents even exist, right? That was like, it was this very kind of visceral, I want to crush everyone who steals money from poor families because they're buying homes. And it wasn't like subtle. It was very much like, I want to crush this industry for a very moral reason. And because not only, by the way, are you taking money from the family, you're misrepresenting their interests, right? Like, you're buying a house using someone else's money under the title of agent, where you have no actual agency. You have no interest in helping that family get the best price. You have every interest in making $21,000 by closing the deal. And so I started testing that. I started going with other friends who are making offers to see what happens. Like, what happens on the margin? And on the margin, what I mean by that is, you make an offer and someone comes back to you. So the house is listed for $690, you offer $680, they come back and say, pay us $710. In every single conversation I listened to, every single one of them, from every one of my friends, the agent would come back and be like, dude, you should do $710. Why? Because they get zero if you bid $705 and the house doesn't close, and they get exactly $21,000 if it closes at $710. They have every single interest in the world to screw you as the consumer, and they do. And so at that moment, sorry Andy, wherever you are, he's just learning how to do real estate. Sorry, buddy. Really great real estate agent back there, though. But I was like, God, this is horrible, right? Like, imagine a family that's like scrapped and saved for 15 years, they can buy their first house, and you have this person who's pretending to be their friend, doing everything they can to get them to spend another $20,000 of not their money. That's horrible, right? Like, they're truly, like, from a moral and like visceral perspective, I had never been more angry in my life. And so I partnered with my two co-founders, David Erocker and Michael Doherty, And they had been working on real estate from a totally different angle, but they shared my dislike for the industry. And we sat down, went through what they were kind of thinking about, and we decided to start the company together, and they brought me on. They'd already started a company called Appliance Computing, and they brought me on as the third co-founder. So I joined them. And so then we sat down and said, well, what can we do about this? And Michael, who is not a software guy, Michael's like a very kind of visionary product guy, was like, dude, what we can do is we can make these maps and you like drag them. Like, no, you cannot. I was like, well, look, we made this in a Windows client. You can drag the map really quick. And I was like, you can't do that on the web, buddy. I mean, this is back in the day of Yahoo Maps where you clicked, you waited 25 seconds for the map to refresh, and then another map showed up. He's like, no, I believe we can do it. I believe we can do it. And he eventually convinced me that it was possible. And so the next week, then I emailed all my friends at Amazon, at Real TV, and Microsoft, and I was like, hey guys, look, I'll treat you to dinner. I want to pitch you on an idea. And so I took, I want to say like 11 people out to dinner. And I said, look, I'm going to join these guys. I'm going to be the co-founder, and I'll pay you guys all with equity. And I want you to work for the next 6 months, every single night from 6 p.m. till 2 in the morning, and I'll work with you, and we're going to build this thing. And I don't know what I said. Like something I said must have been much more compelling than that. But like 9 of the 11 people signed up, and over the ensuing next 6 months, we built all the back-end infrastructure to suck in the data. We built the very first interactive mapping application, and we launched in, I think, September or October 2004. I will share the coolest thing about launching Redfin was we launched it like on a Wednesday or something like that, and on the Thursday, the next day, I used to walk to the office. I lived in downtown Seattle, and I'd walk to the office. I stopped at Starbucks on the way, and every single computer in the Starbucks had Redfin's website on it. Like the next day, the day we launched. And so we went from 0 traffic on the day before launch to having 400,000 users the day after. In fact, our tier 2, the guy 2 layers up on our IP, the guy that sold us bandwidth, called us because he thought we launched a porn site, our site. And he's like, dude, I've never seen anything like this. You guys are definitely running porn. And we're like, kind of, right? Like it's like real estate porn. People call it real estate porn nowadays, right? Like it's addicting. And it was the first interactive map. And what was cool is like literally everyone in Seattle went on that website that day. I mean, it was 0 to 400,000, and we stayed at 300,000 from that day on.
So Redfin, when it was launched, had the mandate or the reputation of killing the broker industry. That passion you talked about, what you were trying to disrupt, this inefficient broker BS market. You spent your time at Redfin. You obviously moved on to the next opportunity, which we'll get to. But now, a couple years removed, they've gone public now. What do you think they're doing compared to what that original mission was? How would you assess it?
Yeah, I mean, so we ended up hiring a guy named Glenn Kelman to be the CEO after a year or so, and he's phenomenal. He's like one of the neatest CEOs out there, and he has been true to our vision since day one. And what's interesting is that wasn't everything we were doing back then was very counter trends. None of the VCs were investing in what's now called UX, right? And we had this slide in our investment deck called the user experience, and here's why it's amazing, and here's why we're attracting users, and why that's going to continue. 0 investment interest in that, like 0 to 0, 0. So we were way ahead of the Web 2.0 curve. We were arguably the very first like hyper interactive user experience. And we had these principles of like, tackle the industry. And Glenn did this great interview for 60 Minutes, maybe like 5 years ago, where he talks about how he has carried that forward. And he is so true to the vision of, regardless of screwing other agents, right, like, which was kind of my angle, his is much more, let's make the best, most capital efficient experience for consumers, which I think is probably a more positive way of saying something kind of similar. It's a much more positive way of saying something similar, I think one might even say. And he's just been phenomenal at staying with that. So they've launched other vertically integrated services. So they launched Title, which if you've ever bought a home, you know that you didn't pick, 99% of you did not pick who your title agency was. Those guys made another like $800 in profit off of you too, by the way, in case you weren't aware of it. And you had no choice in that. And so they've launched that service as well as a vertically integrated, low-cost option that's high quality. And because it's driven by technology, they can deliver at lower cost, deliver it at scale, and do it at a higher quality. And then most recently, they launched my favorite product, which is mortgage. And again, if you've ever gone through this process, your mortgage broker makes between 20 basis points and 25 basis points off of your loan, right? Like for doing, again, exactly what is like filling out 3 pieces of paper up to 20 pieces of paper for you. And so they've integrated that as well. And again, with the vision much aligned with kind of where I think our heart is, which is make the best, cheapest experience for consumers. From the outside watching that, it's been frustrating and sometimes, right? Because I see the product, and how many of you guys know that Redfin has their own agents? How many of you use Redfin? I'm gonna guess all of you, but how many of you guys know that Redfin has their own agents? Like about half of you use it, right? Good God, right? I mean, for an app that you use every day, the only way that they make money, they tell you exactly nothing about. And so I'm always emailing to you like, hey, you might want to put it like here. You could like just tell users a little bit more about this, tell them about this, because their conversion rate right now, and if you look at their S1, it's pretty low. And so their opportunity on the upside to convert consumers is humongous, right? And so I'm always frustrated that they don't do that. But at the same time, I find, and I see this as an investor now, kind of later in my career, I'm betting on Glenn as a whole, right? I'm not betting on Glenn plus my feedback. I'm betting on Glenn, period. And yes, it's frustrating that maybe he doesn't see the world the way that I do, but he's also running the whole company every single day. And as far as I can tell, he's doing a pretty freaking amazing job at it.
You're obviously still passionate about the space. I can tell the way you speak about the company, I don't know what the circumstances are, why you left and when you decided to leave, but you're obviously still passionate about it, and maybe founder's equity doesn't hurt either to ease the pain.
Nope.
So, did Redfin, how much capital did Redfin raise early? You talked about the environment being challenging. What was that like?
Oh man, it was brutal. So one, we were in Seattle, right? So being in Seattle, the ecosystem's not nearly as robust as it is here. You really are somewhere else. Whereas, in the TriValley, one of the advantages of being here is you're kind of somewhere else, but you're kind of here, right? Like for all my friends in Menlo Park that are investing out here, they can kind of squint their eyes and see it as the same place. Seattle is a plane ride away. It is a plane ride to every board meeting. It is a different ecosystem, it's a different hiring situation, it's a different competitive set. And obviously I think Amazon started to really change that in a big way. I don't know if you saw the CNN headline, like MBAs would rather go to Amazon than Wall Street now. Hells yeah. I would all day long, but back then, I mean, Amazon was also on the cover of the Wall Street Journal every quarter saying, is this the quarter Amazon goes out of business, right? So Amazon was not the behemoth and the strong behemoth that it's seen as today. And so from a capital raise perspective, we raised like $100,000 from like 10 people. I mean, we were running around hustling. And that was our first round of angel money. And then we really struggled to raise the next $1 million. And I mean, there's kind of a bunch of different reasons that could be, but I would definitely say, I'll flip this and say, if I were a first-time founder today, and I would say from an investor perspective, these are one of the things I look for, is what we had was the hustle, and what we didn't have was being surrounded by people who had more experience than us. And when I look at companies as an investor now, I think as I reflect back on that moment, I think we would have done infinitely better had we put just 2 or 3 much more experienced people either on our board of directors, actually, yes, on our board of directors, and a couple of advisors. So as I start companies now, I'm very proactive about having a very experienced independent board member very early in the cycle. When I started Relevance, that was the first person I added to the company, was a woman named Ellen Siminoff, who is one of the EVPs at Yahoo very early. And from an investor perspective, you look at companies, and I look at companies with you sometimes, and it's kind of what you look for. You want someone who's got like just this drive and this fire at the head, and then someone who's just much more even-keeled, who has that experience and that wisdom, so you get the spit in the fire with the wisdom. And I think if we would have done that, we would have had a much easier time raising capital, because we were just that spit and fire all the time.
So then you transitioned to Rich Relevance. Tell, for people who don't know what that company did, what that experience was like, because you were the CEO and founder of that from kind of day one, right? So a little different experience.
Yeah, so at Rich Relevance, so I started that company with two of my best friends whom I've known for over 30 years. And that one, like I said, I hired Ellen Siminoff very early as a board of director member. I will say that again. Find the most senior, most credible, most helpful, most stable and experienced person you can if you're starting a company and put them on your board early. Make sure that you trust them unconditionally. Spend the time to vet them. Spend the time to understand what their intent is so they understand what your intent is. And that their loyalty, by the way, you know, you're seeing this a lot in the Uber situation about loyalty to people. Their loyalty should be to the vision. As much as, you know, as a CEO, you want to have this power, things like that power should be directed towards the vision. And if you find someone who's directed towards that vision, I think you'll find that alignment comes very quickly. So one, put that early board of directors, that was the first thing I did very right there. So as we were raising capital too, it also created a back channel. So we had this very senior woman who was connected with all the VCs. So when, you know, one of the VCs came in with like a lowball term sheet, she called them on a Saturday and was like, do you even really fucking want this deal? Because like you guys are gonna get crushed. And sure enough, you know, on Monday we get like a 35% premium on our term sheet, right? So, you know, and think about that, right? You guys think about, gosh, it's a $4 million valuation or $5 million valuation, or $8 million valuation. In VC land, what they're thinking about is ownership and dilution. So it's not really a quote unquote change in your valuation. The company wasn't worth $9 million on Friday and then worth $13 million on Monday. That's not actually the case. It's a function of how much do they get for how much do they pay. And that does kind of equate to ownership and valuation. Sorry, it does equate to ownership, it kind of equates to valuation, but it isn't a real valuation. And so I think one of the things that people get really kind of caught up in early stage too, and I did at Rich Relevance for sure, was like, oh, well, I want a $5.5 million valuation because that means I'm worth X. And that's really just the absolute wrong way to look at it. That was probably the first lesson I learned, was like all those numbers are funny money. Really think about how much do you own and are they aligned to the vision and are they acting in a way that's fair. At Rich Relevance, we raised about $110 million in venture. It's about a $50 million run rate, profitable business in the SaaS space, doing real-time analytics for retailers. Grown it to, it's now about 120 employees. At its peak, it was about 200. And an amazing ride. I would say that probably the biggest lesson I learned there is every trend has a peak and a valley. And if you think that you're at the peak, you are probably right, and you should go with what you're, you know, do some soul searching, think about it. But we missed our peak, right? So our peak was probably at the height of SaaS was probably 2012. And you know, people were just throwing out 12x valuations on recurring revenue. They were throwing out 12x valuations on future recurring revenue at that time. And you know, and if you think about an EBITDA business, right, you're lucky to get 8x EBITDA trailing, right? So I had an intuition that was our peak. And one of the biggest lessons I learned from that was I brought that to our board and I said, hey, I think we're kind of nearing a point where we should think about this. If you're the CEO of a company and you think that's the case, whether you're a seed company and you've raised $10,000 from your family, or you're a VC funded company and you've raised 20, 30, 40, 50, $100 million, $200 million, if you feel that way, there's no one in the world that knows that better than you do. And you should certainly check yourself and kind of look around, but don't say that tentatively, right? If you really feel that way, missing that peak, missing that moment is one of the worst things you can do. And from you know, you asked about like making money on Redfin. One of the things that I learned through that whole process too is that you can make a lot more money by selling a company for $40 million when you own 50% of it than you can by selling it for $250 million when you own 3% of it, right? It's pretty simple math, but those are real numbers, right? Like that's what happens to people. And by the way, don't piss on do that math. That's $6 million, right? Like that's a lot of money. But it turns out 20 is a lot more than that, a lot of money. And so I think a lot of people get really caught up in this like that idea of valuation. They get caught up in TechCrunch. They get caught up in Crunchbase. And one of my mentors is a guy named Reese Duca from Investment Group of Santa Barbara. And he says, you always have to remember that you're mostly aligned with your VC investors with one exception. They have a portfolio of 25 companies and you have a portfolio of exactly one company. So they're averaging out their returns on every company and they'll push for a higher return. When that may frankly not be the right outcome for this particular company. And you always have to remember there's only one person in the whole world when you're the CEO and founder of a company that knows what that is, and it's going to be you. And there's only exactly one person in that boardroom who's going to agree with you, and that person in that situation has to win.
So let's talk a little about Deep Sentinel and how you started that, what the vision was, a little bit about what the product and the offering are, because my understanding is you took some time between your stint at Rich Relevance and really looked at the market, looked and said, did you know what you were going to do when you left Rich Relevance?
Yeah, so I didn't know exactly what I was going to do, but I knew who I was going to work with. So in about Q3 of 2014, my wife and I made the decision that I was gonna leave in the next year, and so I reached out to a venture firm called Lux Capital, and VCs are kind of all over the place. I can go into that. I don't know if you want me to go in more depth about that, but like I picked Lux because Lux is probably one of the only remaining what I'd call hard tech VCs. And at Rich Relevance, my job, because it's a SaaS enterprise sales company, my job had become entirely sales, right? Like I was flying around on planes, talking to customers, touching the product almost exactly zero. And so I really wanted to get back in this world where I came from, where I'm touching the product, I'm coding if I can at all possible. I understand the technology, I care about the technology, I'm engaged in it. And so I picked Lux because their partners are PhDs, right? The partner I ended up picking is a guy named Bilal Zuberi. And he has a PhD from MIT, right? I mean, how many of you guys have your PhD from MIT? I certainly hell don't. I didn't even get into MIT as an undergrad, for God's sake. Thank you. So, yeah, I mean, I started talking to Lux at that point. I said, look, I'm going to leave in the next year and I want to work with you guys. And I want to spend time with you guys over the next couple of years because I want to build something in AI or robotics, and I want to go back to my roots. And so when I left, I immediately, I told Lux immediately in early Q1 that I was going to be leaving later, reached out to them again, and then I ended up spending a bunch of time with them. And in that course, I had kind of an embarrassing event. In about May of 2015, I don't know if you guys ever saw the videos about the different types of Atari and other AIs that can like play video games. So I saw this one that played Super Mario, and I was like, shit, that's dumb. I can make one so much better, and so I did. And it took about like 2 weeks, and I went through a bunch of different trends on it, and I discovered this particular way of training neural networks that had multiple layers. And no one had really figured out how to do this like multi-layer perception on networks at the last time I'd done my research in 1990. So I like go driving down to Menlo Park, I like zoom down to Bilal at Lux, and I was like, dude, check this out. I made a multi-layer neural network, and it works. And I showed him, and I compared the two, and it went from training and playing Mario Brothers in about 48 hours to doing it in about 45 minutes. It was sweet. It was like really freaking good. And I was like, dude, look what I invented. And they're like, yeah, I'd love to tell you you invented this, but the guys at Google figured this out about like 2 years ago. Go read about deep learning. So I started reading about deep learning and getting deeper in that. I thought it was all marketing fluff until then. And I became the world's biggest zealot and fan for deep learning over the course of the next year. So then I picked that as a vertical. I spent almost an entire year working with Lux about once a month, once every 2 months, whenever I felt like it, I went through the process of evaluating different horizontals, different verticals. Do I want to sell to government? Do I want to do an enterprise business? Do I do hardware? Do I want to do software? How do I want to tackle this? How can I use this really incredible technology to do something new? And I got it down to 2 options in Q1 of last year. And it was home security or hardware, like building deep learning hardware to compete with NVIDIA and other companies like that. And then I had a burglary in my neighborhood. I live in the preserve over here, and as I don't know if you guys have ever had this happen, you go to the homeowners association and everyone's freaking out, and it's like, oh my God, let's privatize the streets, let's get roaming security guards, let's buy guns and have everyone have guns, and it got a little wacko. It's a very highly immigrant-based community, and as immigrant-based communities can be, they're a little bit insular, so there was like a whole lot of racism, frankly, at that homeowner association meeting. And I was like, Jesus, come on people, let's chill out quite a bit here. And so I was like, let me call Chief Spiller and ask him what his suggestion is. And so Chief Spiller points me to this guy in Laguna Oaks. Guy in Laguna Oaks actually watches all the cameras in the entire community of Laguna Oaks and you know this, you were at that homeowners meeting, right? I mean, it was crazy, right? And so the guy in Laguna Oaks watches all the cameras all night long. So don't go to Laguna Oaks and break in there, by the way, guys. And I was like, wow, that's cray-cray. I don't want to do that. But then as I was sleeping on it, and I realized that he walked me through all these different scenarios about how he was detecting crime, and I was like, oh my God, that's exactly what deep learning can do. And so I then that next day I bought a ticket to the security conference, which was in, I want to say like March or April of last year. So I go to the security conference and I walk around and I'm like meeting with all the companies to see if anyone else is thinking about the world this way. Zero zilch. And these are all like family-run businesses. They're all margin-based. It's all like 90% margin. By the way, if you have security money in your house, you are paying a 90% margin to whoever you buy that from. They are not doing shit for you ever. And the second thing I learned at that security conference was like, oh my God, there were no police officers, no law enforcement representatives. So I called my buddy back in the police department. I was like, hey man, why aren't there any cops? He was like, because we hate alarm companies. And I was like, what? You know, as a consumer, I always thought like my alarm company was like buddy, they went out for beers on Fridays, right? And he's like, no, hell no. We get like 90% false alarms from those guys. They're a waste of our time. They make our lives horrible. And I was like, whoa. And so I went then and I went back to the conference. I walked around for a little while, and I then realized, oh my God, this must be what it was like when Jeff Bezos went to a retail conference in the 90s. You walk around and you realize nobody sees the future coming. Everyone wants to make their $100,000 a year bookstore better, but no one sees that there's an entirely disruptive way of doing this. So I literally went from that conference to my hotel, and in the lobby of the hotel in Dallas, I incorporated. I called my attorney, who's my attorney from my last company. I was like, dude, we're incorporating today. Here are all the rules. We're off to the races. Lux and Jeff Bezos led the seed round at about $1 million, and then I raised my Series A last year from Shasta about $6.5 million.
So what's great in that story is the way you evaluate a market is applicable to a first-time founder, a third, fourth-time founder. What's different in that is kind of your access, right? To be able to go hang out with a prominent VC hardware company and vet that idea, and that access is a perk of being a multi-time founder. We look at companies all the time. Do you think the advantage you get, the credibility you get as a second-time founder is worth it in all cases and justified? Yeah, I'm getting at the values and the experience of a multi-time founder, right? Did you learn about failure in one of those examples and prior experiences that benefited you setting up Deep Sentinel now?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I hope so. I'm almost 40. I'll be 40 next month, and so I think I bring with me a lot of really great failure experiences, but without having become jaded, right? I mean, I think a lot of people see failure as a reason to stop, and certainly, by the way, there are times to stop, right? Like, that exists. But you know, I think the thing I like the most about what I'm doing right now is I get to be a third-time founder. I think a first-time founder, you're just like blinders on, run like the fucking wind, right? If you're a first-time founder, just go get your best advisors you can around you and just fucking go, because there's nothing better. You know, you're either right or you're wrong, and you're either gonna go fast or you're gonna go slow. I know Tim Harkness, I interviewed him for one of these a little while ago, and he said the exact opposite, but I mean, he's in bio, I'm talking about software, right, like technology. And as a second-time founder, I find that I over-indexed against my one experience, right? Like I tried to overcorrect for everything that went wrong at Redfin, at Relevance, and now I've got the experience of founding 2 companies and having advised and invested in and co-founded a bunch of other companies around that. But then don't forget that fire, right? I mean, I think one of the other things that can happen as you get more comfortable in your decision making is you can calm down. I still stay up. Winston, my co-founder, is back there, right? And like, I will still call him at 2 o'clock in the morning, and he's still welcome to call me at 2 o'clock in the morning. And we do that, you know. And what's that?
I'm calling tonight.
Yeah, maybe tomorrow would be better. But yeah, I mean, you know, by the way, after this, I have a meeting at night from 9:30 until 11:30 with one of our suppliers, right? Like, no joke. And you know, I think you have a tendency. I have seen a tendency in people to slow down and kind of take things easy. And you know, when I look at what does it take to make a company amazing, what's the difference between $1 billion outcomes and $20 million, $50 million, $100 million, $0 million outcomes? I know exactly $0 billion companies that have been founded by people that don't have fire in their belly. And so if that fire is what it costs in order to get that experience, no, I don't think that experience is worth it. But if you can combine the both, that's why I love doing what I'm doing now.
You can tell. Deep Sentinel, tell us a little bit more about what's going to differentiate it, what's special about it that we can all watch for, particularly in a crowded space, as you mentioned. There's a lot of home security systems out there. What are we watching for? It's going to make it special.
So I'll start with the first wrong line as a founder, right? So when you go into a VC pitch and they're like, so, you know, tell me about your competitors. We don't have any competitors. Don't use that line. That's bad. It's cute. Like after you leave, the partners will look at each other and be like, ha, wasn't that cute? Don't do it. We have to take a ton of respect in terms of our competitors, and I'll pick out 2 that I think are particularly salient for me. One is Ring, which I think is doing a phenomenal job, right, of canvassing the world. They just hired Shaquille O'Neal to be their spokesperson, who I think is a phenomenal spokesperson. He's one of the first people I reached out to when I started this company to see if they would help us. Turns out some gun likes money, so he said no. I think about Ring a lot. And the second one is Netgear Arlo. I don't know if you guys have seen those. Those are hang-up cameras that are all battery powered. And I think those guys have done a phenomenal job as well. And so I have a ton of respect for them as my competition. Where I come from, where I say, look, let's think about differentiation. There's 2 things that I think about in this order. The first one is, what is the problem that you're solving and what is its importance to the customer? And this is something that I got an opportunity to go up and meet Jeff Bezos, and I'd love to talk about that in a minute too. A couple weeks ago, I haven't seen him for a long time, and it's phenomenal. I mean, his consistency from 10 years ago when I met with him last was like 100%. You're solving a problem that is fundamentally different than Ring and Netgear Arlo. Even though some of your technology is the same and some of the solution looks the same, you're solving a different problem. And the problem that you're solving is 100 times more valuable to the customer than the problem that Ring and Netgear Arlo are solving. And so I asked him a question. I said, you know, part of our business model incorporates something that I think is kind of hokey dokey, and it's not something that I would prefer to have in our business model because it's expensive. It's like not very scalable, but it's critical to solve the problem that actually matters in our market. And he said, don't even think about that again. If it's required to solve the problem and the problem is this important, do it. Do it all day long, do it bells on, and just make sure you do it better than anyone else. And so that to me, and I can't relate, that's a little bit of secret sauce, and you know, so I'm not gonna like spout that everywhere, but like that to me keeps me motivated every day. When I wake up in the morning, I know that we're gonna do something different. You know, our investors ask me like, hey, if someone offered you $40 million today, would you do it? And my answer is consistently, sorry Winston, is consistently no, because the world needs this. Like we are solving the problem that everyone else says that they're tackling, and if no one does it, the world's going to be a worse place for it. Yeah.
That's great. Particularly relevant for this crowd on a regional basis. You could have built that company probably anywhere in the world, certainly anywhere in the States you wanted to. Why here? Why in the TriValley? Why Pleasant?
I think there's three things that three reasons I did it. Two of which I'm still testing, by the way. So and I presented them to our investors as such. But I think the tests are going very well. The first reason is I live here and I am not going to commute to all parts of the world again. That's one of the reasons I chose a B2C business instead of a B2B business, is I just am not into the 200,000 mile a year, 300,000 mile a year thing. I mean, my last year at Relevance, I had status on 7 airlines. I want you to think about that for just a freaking second, right? Like, do you even know 7 airlines, for Christ's sake, that you've flown on this much? I had status on 7 airlines, right? Like, I would get first class upgrades on 2 of them for free every single time I flew, right? I mean, that's super cool, but it sucked. And so I was over it. Part of the reason I needed to leave Relevance was for my family. I just wasn't seeing my family. I was traveling almost 200 days a year. And so I wanted to change it. I wanted to be able to work 18 hours a day, work till 2 in the morning, work till 3 in the morning if I have to, but still see my kids every day. Still have dinner with my family, 3-4 times a week. And that's been just, I love that. Like I take my kids to school and I'm still in the office before 9 o'clock almost every single day. That's awesome. The second reason is, gosh, it's actually pretty legit to start a company out here, I think. There's a talent pool that's pretty amazing. We have hundreds of thousands of people here who have higher education indices than in San Francisco and parts of the peninsula. And all of them get in their car and drive for 3 hours a day, for God's sake. Jesus, how horrible is that? And so I think we have an opportunity to tap into that. And if you get an offer from us, we're going to give you a 10% discount about whatever you're getting paid on the other side. And it's going to be worth it because you get 3 hours of your day back every single day. And so far that's proven to be worthwhile to people. The third piece was that a lot of the people we want to hire are older in their career. They're not the 22-year-olds coming out of school. And so they're 27 to 35, they have PhDs, they have a family, and they want to start a family. They would like to own more than a postage stamp in Palo Alto. Which, by the way, a postage stamp in Palo Alto, I believe it's against US regulations, but it's now like $1.5 million for a postage stamp there. It's a sum gun there to buy a house. And that's proven to be true too. So when I go on Angel List and we're recruiting, people want to move here. Pleasanton is a named location on people's Angel List profiles. And so I found that in general, the talent draw here is amazing. We've got a great community. We've got access to lots of resources. We can go to San Francisco in less than 2 hours if we need to, and we don't have a horrible commute and have a great quality of life. So
We've said about the fund and what we're building for years now, we're close enough but just far enough away.
Yeah.
Which I love.
Exactly.
So you're hiring some world-class talent in a field that's the hottest field in the world right now. I know.
Here. Not that good. Like B-class talent, guys.
So the data scientists and some of your software people, you're competing against the Googles, the Facebooks, everybody else. How are you building that team under those kind of restrictions and in this crazy environment now?
Yeah, so I mean, I think that it's much like software engineering, right? If you go back to engineering in 2006, 2007, 2008, when things were heating up again, you really segregate the world very quickly into people that want to take risk and want to have impact and want to get rewarded for that impact, and people that want to have kind of a stable job. And certainly there is a higher index for that latter category in the TriValley than, for example, in downtown Palo Alto or in San Francisco. But it exists, right? And I don't have a ton of competition in this area for that talent. The second thing I think that we offer is, and I know you guys can plug your ears, I'm sorry if this is a lie, but I mean, like, I don't think that there are a lot of founders that both actually understand the technical ability of deep learning and machine learning and actually understand how to raise capital and how to build a business model. That combination of three, as I've listened as an investor on the other side of the table, in general, I find founders fall into the category of PhDs who are phenomenally, wickedly smart and are going to get acqui-hired in the first year or not. And it's like just that's the entire bet. Or MBAs who are, apologies again, just total blowhards. And they're overselling the technology and have no freaking idea what the heck they're talking about. And I mean, it's literally bifurcated like that. Sorry, Encore. And the the people that are talking about machine learning without having any idea about what it is. And so I've really spent as much time as I can making sure that I can bridge both of those worlds in a way that's really unique and presents a unique opportunity to anyone who says, look, I really want to be in this space, I want to continue exploring, I want to do research and make a product that's great, and then I want to see my product be freaking awesome. And to do all three of those things, you really either have to choose a very small scope and go to a Facebook or an Amazon or a Google, or a Google just eat food and not see anything come out, which is fine too there. But if you want to see your work have broad impact, I think we have maybe we have 5 competitors for talent at that level to do that.
So selling the experience, the dream.
I mean, I think so. I mean,
I know most of your team, and I'd say that's the case. Congratulations so far. I'm not sure how much time we have. Brandon, is he even around? How much time do we have?
Probably another 10 minutes or so.
And then give him plenty of time for questions, which I'm sure is a valuable part. Yeah, you want to just go to questions now? Okay, please open it up. Let me walk around and do this.
Thank you, Phil Donahue.
So, I don't think I need it, but first of all...
You need it.
Oh.
And do I need a qualifier? This is Encore, CEO of Swarm Sales, which is one of our portfolio companies that both Sally and I have had a privilege of working with for about a year. So his question may be a little loaded. Let's see.
Yeah. First of all, am I invited to your 40th birthday party? That's the big question, putting you on the spot.
It's in Bora Bora. It's just me and my wife. I think it'd be awkward.
Good answer. You talked a lot about your growth from an investment perspective, like
so. Yes.
I'll see you there. From an investment perspective, how you grew up, as you gained those investments, and then you talked a lot about how you also grew up as a founder. Can you talk a little bit about what you learned in terms of building a team as that process happened? So from Redfin to Rich Relevance and now to Deep Sentinel, right? Just share a little bit about that if you don't mind.
So 2 questions. What did I learn through becoming an investor? And then 2, how did I learn about building a team? Or is there together?
Just talk a little bit about the growth, the learning for in terms of building the team.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, wow, you're right. I mean, it's a big question, and I asked all my mentors when I started Rich Relevance. That was like my big thing, right? I'd never managed a growth company at a second layer management. I'd always managed directly, and so it was like a big deal, kind of learning about, gosh, when you hire someone who manages someone else, how do you do that? And And I thought that was probably my biggest struggle was, it's both a really big problem, because I think a lot of founders do that wrong. They like either manage through or they try to manage too far away, and finding that balance is super hard. And the second thing I would say about that particular problem is you can over-intellectualize it. And it is an intellectual problem, it is a structural problem, but in its essence, it's a people problem. So it's big and messy, right? And so what I've kind of landed on that, which I think is, again, my biggest problem in terms of building teams, or has been my biggest problem, is to do both the right thing by, if you're gonna go through a direct manager, so I have a VP and they have direct reports, Winston has his engineering team, is to do it. Don't not do what your gut is telling you. You are the CEO, you are the founder, you are the product owner, you're the owner of your customer relationship, you're the owner of the vision. So if you see something going on that is wrong, do not fucking stop, right? Like, go back to my first reference. What does it take to be a great CEO? I've had the chance to know Travis Kalanick super well over the last 20 years, Sean Parker from Facebook, Reid Hoffman, you know, every single one of them has that fire. So if you allow this second layer management to get between you and expressing that fire, you're quelching the thing that enables you to potentially get to $1 billion, period, full stop. That said, you gotta simultaneously respect that there's an organizational structure. So if I go through Winston, I'm gonna keep Winston in the loop, and I'm gonna be respectful of the fact that those people report to him, but I'm gonna own the piece that I own. I don't care how you do it. Okay, you wanna use Ubuntu 16 instead of 14. Maybe I'll get in a little bit of a tiffy with him about that, right? But at the end of the day, what I care about is that end goal, and just don't let go of that. And I think when you're younger and a bit more junior, it's easy to get kind of caught up in the egotistical piece about how you get to the solution, as well as getting to the solution. And secondly, it's also easy to second guess yourself and not do it. Third, it's easy to forget to keep the person in the loop. So it's just really combining those three rules. In terms of hiring and getting in front of people, actually building that team. And then the third question I'll answer as part of that would be culture. So building that team is interview every freaking employee. Again, same thing, right? Like, you can have your second level reports or first level reports like doing stuff, but if you have a doubt about someone, do not fucking hire them. You will fire them within 6 months, or you will wish that you fired them within 6 months. And by the way, if you feel like firing them in 6 months, fire them in 6 months, don't fire them in 9 months. As brutal as that sounds, you're gonna be doing everyone a favor. And it's not a function of them being a bad person, right? People are sometimes just not a fit. Sometimes people come from big companies and they want that stability, and maybe they thought they wanted to try a startup, but if you're feeling tension at every junction, at every interaction, move on for both of your sakes. It's painful, but it's more painful for them to come to work every day. Trust me, like I've done post interviews of people that I've let stay on longer, and they're like, dude, it was horrible. Every day I woke up, I was stressed out, I didn't want to come to work, I was getting an ulcer, I was fighting with my wife, I was fighting with my husband. Like, just make the hard decisions and do what your role is. Third thing is own your culture. And whatever that means to you is what I mean. Full stop.
Thank you.
Question here.
Yeah.
Hi, Sridhar. I'm about 6 months into a new startup, my first startup. So one of the questions I have for you, which is very relevant for me, is you went from, we got started on Redfin, we started building this technology, and we launched a website, and then the next thing you said was in Starbucks and everywhere people were using your website. But that sounds like a long journey between the two. How did you go from somebody who's just building tech to a whole bunch of people knowing about you, wanting to use it? And at what stage did the investors say, yeah, this is going to get traction?
That's a super good question. So I'll break that down into two questions, right? So one is, when do you know that it was going to work? And then two, when did the investors finally figure that out? So Redfin actually is a really unique thing in that it wasn't that long. It was literally 24 hours from the time it was done to the time we had 400,000 users. So unfortunately, that literally was that fast. So I don't have a lot.
How did they know about it?
So we had an article written about us in the Seattle Times, we had an article written about us in the real estate news, and then the next day it was written about in Wall Street Journal. No one had ever built interactive maps, right? Like let me just kind of put it on the table, right? Like this is the fundamental technology that is in Google Maps and in Apple Maps. Every subsequent mapping product in the world was built on what Redfin launched that day. So like it was a pretty transformative consumer experience. Not as great as like the iPhone per se. I mean it is a core technology that on that day was introduced to the world and is now used by 80% of the world's population, right? Like it was a pretty transformative visual thing too. And because it was visual, it was very easy for everyone to get enticed and engaged in it. So I don't really have a great answer for you there because I don't think most of us get a chance to do something like that. And I didn't think I was doing something like that. I knew it was cool, but like, good God, right? I mean, it literally, what was it, a year later, Google copied it and made Google Maps, right? So,
How about the investor?
so the investor side was much harder. And then, and I'll break that into two sections. Like one, when do you quit your job? Which I think is very much tied to the investor. Unless you happen to have money and you can take 2 years off or 3 years off and do it on your own. And I don't presume that most people can do that. Like I don't think most people can or should do that, by the way. So the first part would be what I call the when do you quit your job question. And that answer is don't do that until you have at least verbal commitments from investors unless you really have the flexibility. There's a number of founders I've talked to 3 months after they quit their jobs who are then having to shut down their dream because they jumped a little too early is massive. And at the same time, like I don't want to quench anyone's thirst to like take risk and get out there and do it. But if you don't have the flexibility to do that, like I ate ramen for a whole freaking year on Redfin. And we're like, dude, I remember one of our advisors, Katie Drucker, she took us to a nice dinner and it was in June or July of 2004 and I was just like, oh my God, I forgot what real food tastes like. There's more than MSG in the world, right? I mean, it was insane. I ordered dessert first. I remember this. Like she took us to a really nice restaurant in Seattle. It was an eating club, so it was like a private restaurant, right? It was like a place for millionaires. And I was like, oh my God, I have literally been eating ramen for 11 and a half months at this point. And I ordered every dessert on the dessert menu. That was what I had for dinner. And she was like, she remembers that to this day. We had coffee 2 weeks ago. She's like, I remember when I first took you to dinner. So don't quit your freaking job until you're ready for it. And you need to like buckle up and be into that. And when that is it's different for every business, right? I mean, you hear kind of the great dramatic stories where, this founder drops out of college and raises $100 million the next day. That could be you. It could be. The likelihood's pretty freaking low, right? I mean, the reason venture capital funds are structured the way they are is because they say no to, I want to say it's like 99% of people who come in and pitch without even really thinking about it. They give you a 1 in 10 chance if you get into that 1%. And, it's a very selective process. And so if you're going after venture specifically, you gotta know that. That is the way that they're designed. They're only designed to select very specific types of companies. They're designed to find companies that are truly disruptive. They're gonna break a whole market. 2, they're designed to find companies that can return their entire fund. It's what they call returning the fund. You need to be able to get the entire company up to a multi-billion-dollar valuation when they own 20%. They on average raise a $200 to $300 million fund. So you need to be able to return that on them owning 20%. All $200 million. I don't mean return their $20 million. Return all $200 million for them, right? So in Lux, when I took money from Lux, or I took money from Shasta, part of that conversation was, hey, seller, you're going to sell this for $100 million. Is that your intent here, right? And so you got to know what you're doing. If you're not going after venture, you can do very different things, right? If you're starting a gas station, and you want to, gas stations are great. They generate $100,000 a year in profit. That costs about $1 million to $2 million and generate $100,000 to $200,000 a year. That's a very different thing. You quit your job and go do that anytime you want, as long as you got $2 million backing. So know which one of those things it is that you're doing, and then know that you have the financial plan underneath it to support what it is that you need to do.
So when did the investors realize, right, when even though it has 1 million users, it's a viable business?
So that took a while. It took us probably 6 months of fundraising. You know, I think that's different now. We were in Seattle, it's not as competitive. People don't really give a shit in Seattle. Like, they'll just bleed you in Seattle. In the Bay Area, you know, you pitch 6 or 7 VCs, and they either go or they don't. I mean, you'll know very quickly. If they email you within 48 hours, you're moving forward, with positive, by the way. Within 48 hours, you're moving forward. If they don't, that's what's called an implicit no. Like, don't fool yourself. They say, oh, this is great, keep me up to date. That's a no. Let me just, you know, they don't know you, they don't want to be disrespectful, that's a no. It's not a maybe, it's not a later, it's a no.
I have a question for Deep Sentinel.
I'm here too.
In regards to Deep Sentinel. As far as kind of the machine learning aspect of what you're building out there, are you needing large swaths of data in order to build out a quality machine learning product? How are you doing that? Because it seems like a chicken or the egg type of product issue at the beginning, where you may not have enough data in order to make the machine learning substantial enough, but on the other hand, you don't really have a machine learning product enough to put it out to market for people to be able to use reasonably. How do you kind of deal with that at the beginning to be able to say, okay, well, we're going to put out an amazing product that's based off of machine learning, its value is becoming from that over time, but at the beginning, crap, we have 4 houses signed up for this, right?
So I mean, that's part of what being a product person is, and that's kind of the part of that secret sauce about bridging, understanding how the deep learning actually functions, what it can do, what it can't do, and understanding the market. And so we've figured out a way to bootstrap that gets us out of the box to be pretty good.
Okay. In general, is that more of like a glorified decision tree, or how does that work for you guys?
Very well.
Fair enough.
Nice try there.
If you don't mind sharing a little bit about your technology stack, are you using out-of-box technologies like Spark or TensorFlow, for example? And also, what about orchestration in the data center? Are you using Kubernetes or Mesos? And then as a second part of the question also, since you have such a good relationship with Jeff Bezos, you must get a lot of good deals on AWS. He's also an investor in everything. So I'm guessing you don't have to optimize your use of spot instances or anything.
Well, we probably should pretty soon, because we'll be using a lot of them. Jeff does a really good job separating his personal stuff from Amazon stuff, so we do have some credit, which is fine, and it's great. In terms of the stack, we try to use a lot of open source, and that's something obviously that over the last 12 years, really since 2005, with Red Hat's emergence as an actual company, has become much more predominant and acceptable. When we raised our first round at Relevance, we had to literally list every single open source package we did and its license and have a legal opinion on every single one. So we did, I mean, our financing round probably cost like $40,000 of IP analysis. These days it's much more well thought through, so we use a lot of the packaged stuff. In terms of specific orchestration, do we use Mesos? I don't think we do.
You don't need to.
And we don't need to. We use Chef though, which uses Ruby, and Ruby sucks.
I love versions.
I think Puppet is better than Chef, but
My friend started Chef, I'll let him know you said that.
Both are Ruby though.
no comment on Ruby. I think concurrency and Ruby don't go well together with the global interpreter law.
Anybody else?
Hey, Theo, first-time founder. How do you select the most optimal market of early adopters, even if it's not the most expedient market?
You're doing it wrong.
Please elaborate.
Most expedient.
Okay.
No, I don't. That's wrong. How do you select your first early adopters? if your early adopters are not expedient, I will say that I would question that. You may not be doing it wrong, but like if your early adopters are not quick to market, you very likely are doing something wrong. You may not be, I don't know what you're doing, so like please caveat that. How do you choose your first, B2B or B2C?
B2C.
And they're not fast to adopt?
This is just theoretical.
Okay, if they're not fast to adopt, you're doing something wrong on B2C.
Yeah, like my question is like, for example, Zuckerberg and Facebook, I mean, his first market was, the population of Harvard students, but
And they adopted
they adopted really fast, but like if he had, bypassed that and gone for the entire public at large, it might have been a different story, like.
and you probably would have failed.
Right.
So that's my answer is don't do it. If they're going slow and they're your early adopters, you're almost definitely doing something wrong.
Okay.
On B2B, it's a little bit different. But
Anybody else? Nope. Probably got time for a couple more, Brandon?
So, you elaborated a little bit, or you touched on rather, about multiple disciplines as a founder that you have to have, especially when you're pitching. And, if you're lucky, you've got expertise in many disciplines, i.e., I'm disciplined in the technology part, I'm also good at sales, all the things that are required. But that's just normally not a reality. Usually I have an expertise in one specific area, but I'm knowledgeable in other parts of it. So how do you go about that, or what's your advice when you're pitching or when you're trying to build your team? How do you go about that when your expertise is more narrow? If that makes sense.
So the question is, as I understand it, is the average human being's good at one thing. How do you deal with the fact that a founder needs to be good at, or at least good enough at 10 things?
Yes, and also how do you come across that and say, I realize I have weaknesses in these areas, but this is the idea.
So, and I'm guessing when you're saying come across as, you're saying in pitching people to join the company or pitching people to invest in the company?
Both.
Okay. Yeah, so in general, I'll give you my answer. So for example, in my company, we're building hardware, right? We've got mechanical engineering and electrical engineering. And in general, you as the founder need to, yes, come to the table with your superpower strength, right? And so my superpower strength, for better or worse, for many years, by the way, when it wasn't really cool, was being able to understand the business of AI, right? Not very cool for a really long time. It turns out it's super cool now, which is great. That said, though, in every business that I've done, you have to be a renaissance owner of every single one of them. And CEOs that I've met over the years who say like, yeah, I hired this great gal or guy in sales, and they're just like running it, right? If you say that in your board of directors, for example, I've been in these board meetings, the CEO will then leave and you have a small closed session for like 5 minutes, and they all say, set your calendar for 6 months, we're gonna fire the head of sales in 6 months. Like literally every single time I've heard that in a board meeting. And the reason is because you as the founder have to spend the time and energy to at least have insights and intuition as to how you can guide and lead that organization. Otherwise you just shouldn't have that organization in your company. And so you have to have a sense of renaissance. So to go back to Deep Sentinel, I have never manufactured hardware. The closest I've ever gotten to manufacturing hardware was at Stanford when we built robots by buying one-off parts from catalogs, right? From a MasterCard, for any of you guys who are like EEs or MEs out there, right? Like, yes, with MasterCard. And so now I'm having to deal with how do I do mass production and all that stuff. And so I stay up all night long. Like when I say I work till 2 o'clock in the morning, I'm not saying that kind of by exaggeration or euphemistically. Like I stay up till 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning every single night, and I read about every single part of our business. I read about the customer service and what are the trends and how does that work. I read about how electrical engineering comes together, what causes companies to fail. I am without ego, I hope, in this manner, that I will call any CEO, any founder who has failed and be ready to listen and learn and be wrong about everything that I do. And not just in the sense of like, hey, I'm gonna present what we're doing and I'll listen to your feedback. I will do everything I can to get every piece of feedback from every subject matter expert that I can, so that when it comes to making decisions, I can make the decision. And that last part is the hard one, right? It's easy to kind of listen to a bunch of advice and then defer, and you have to be comfortable bringing together a bunch of subject matter experts, and even in an area where you are not the subject matter experts. I had a meeting this afternoon where I had 4 guys who have their PhD in mechanical engineering, and I made the final decision on how we do our ME. And I do that on every single component of our mechanical engineering. And I have to get to the point that I can be credible in asking the right questions and understanding when I'm being walked up a path that's not good, and then finally be willing to say, hey, I actually don't understand what you just said. And I think the hardest thing as a founder when you're trying to pull that off is to do that last bit. Like, hey, you just said MCU was the term they used, and I was like, I have no idea what the fuck that is, right? Pause, go back, tell me what we're talking about, and then we're gonna go back forward, right? And then you know what I'm gonna read about tonight till 2 o'clock in the morning?
Hi, this is Vishnu, founder again, and the interesting thing was about hiring is one thing that I have consciously taken a decision is to kind of spend 15 to 20 minutes. Earlier it was 20% of my time every week, and I would clock it, and that really worked for me in terms of getting the right guys. But just to kind of get through my question, so what are the 3 things that you saw or you have observed and experienced are different from the B2B model that you were in earlier versus B2C? And the reason for the question is because I have gone into, I'm in the B2B, but it was a very conscious decision for me to kind of go to enterprise, not SMB. So just wanted to kind of hear your thoughts. Maybe just the top 3 points as to how you see the startup being different from what you did to the phase that you are now in a similar phase in the previous company.
So, probably first and foremost, and I'm actually going to just limit to this one because I think it's the only thing that matters. In an enterprise company, do you guys know what enterprise companies are called by investors and B2B companies? Enterprise sales companies. So unless you're running a true SaaS model, right, like where that's the case, I'd say that the number one thing is the reason they're called enterprise sales companies is because that's what they do. They do enterprise sales, right? So Ankur used to work at Oracle right there, right? And I think one of the reasons I connect with him is as soon as I realized that Relevance was turning into an enterprise sales company, I did what that gentleman just asked me. I stayed up, I interviewed every single CEO I could find who had succeeded, and every single CEO who had failed at starting a company that had an enterprise sales team. I then brought in a guy named David Strom, who was the lead board member at EMC and a bunch of other companies, and it had about $20 billion of outcomes, $40 billion of outcomes, including a bunch of, like, one of the competitors to Workday, for example, and tackled it. And the reason I'm gonna only give you one is because if you look at the companies that succeed in B2B where their job is enterprise sales, they succeed or fail entirely on that. Their product can be average, as long as it's like average to mediocre, and you have great sales, you'll win. And you can have average to mediocre marketing. If you have great sales, you'll win. You can have average to mediocre customer service, and if you have great account management, you'll win. And you know, that's the kind of unfortunate truth, but that would be where I'd stop. And I'm focusing on enterprise versus like B2B SMB or B2B SaaS. So, fair?
What last one, probably so. I hope it's not too operational question. Do you have any suggestions for how getting to know your customer base and getting to optimize channels and ways to advertise? And, so we have a very offline kind of business. So there's not as much data to play with. Any suggestions on best practice in that situation? How to get to know your customer?
One of my early mentors at Amazon was a guy named Larry Tesler. Larry Tesler. And Larry's known at Xerox Labs and Apple for starting their small user studies, small user group studies. And what he would do at Xerox and at Apple was they'd come up with a new design or design idea, and instead of trying to do a massively quantitative review, which is what kind of most companies try to do to get statistically significant results, what he did was he built labs and did 3 to 5 people, and did very intense, highly instrumented, very isolated rooms where you could capture every piece of information about human beings, and then design surveys to ask them questions and sit across from them and gather as much qualitative insight as they could. And so I was really blessed to get to spend a lot of time with him when I was at Amazon, because I was kind of the other side of I was the entire other side of the coin, right? My job was to build out a huge data warehouse and then do machine learning analytics on it, be damned who the individual was on the other side. And by working with Larry, the first thing that I did, actually the first product we launched at Amazon, it's my favorite product, was an internal tool. And all my employees were Chinese or Thai. And so what I would do, sorry for the generalization, I'm Chinese too, so I can kind of get it, but was I would buy duck every Thursday for lunch. And so we'd go down to the international district and I'd buy duck. And we'd go into a little conference room and I would pick one user at random from the 45 million users at Amazon. And I would put everything about that user up on the screen. Everything that we had about this one person. And I would put it in front of the PhDs and I would force them to say, tell me what you can imbibe from this individual. And it was amazing, right? I mean, every single week we did this. It got old after a little while, but we did it for probably like 6 months, every single week. And we found there's a librarian in Texas, right? And you could tell she was a librarian. How? Well, because every one of her searches was an ISBN, and every single search where something was available was a conversion. Actually, like a 90% search to purchase conversion rate. We had this lady who was obviously distracted at work, and she would shop for clothes and then stop for like 45 minutes, and then shop for clothes again for like 45 minutes, and then just keep doing that. And she did it every single day for like the entire, 3 years of history. It was the exact same thing. And so we were an entertainment site for her. And so the reason I bring that up is because, certainly you need to have quantitative data, you need to listen to that, but at the root of understanding your customer is insight. Every single time, in every single possible way. And so when I brought in the team of PhDs that I grew at Amazon, the thing that I always started them with was where Jeff Bezos started, which I'm really, I think this comes back together nicely, because I love the outcome of it. Was they were building these models that were entirely based on, oh look, I found this trend in the number, but I have no idea what the hell it means, right? And now everything that we did would lead to an insight that could lead to a subsequent insight that could lead to greater understanding, that could then again lead to better models. And so if you don't have much data, my recommendation would be to get very tactical. Call them, ask them questions, spend time with them, buy them coffee, do whatever it takes to get in touch with them. So when I started Deep Sentinel, for example, I just interviewed tons of homeowners, and I interviewed tons of chiefs of police all around the country. Just called them and said, hey, can I talk for 20 minutes?
It's very good. Thanks.
We had one more guy going.
One more?
I will be the last one. Happy to ask.
Hopefully it's a good question. It'd be really shitty if it were bad.
It's pretty, just to reflect on one of your answers, you said you stay up late until 3 a.m. in the morning. So that
There's only one last night, but usually.
My question is very simple. How do you manage the stress levels?
I think okay. I don't know if it's great.
I know your wife and 2 lovely daughters, and I think I know how you do it. They make you.
Yeah. I mean, being a founder is really freaking hard, right? Being at a startup is really hard, right? Even if you're not the founder. And Right, so I think at the crux of this is it's a marathon and a sprint. That sucks, right? And so what keeps me going, I'll answer it very personally, is to make sure I'm doing something I love. And if that's the case, I think it's okay, right? I don't ever feel worn out, right? Like there's not a part of it that kind of drags on me. You know, we had a little bit of a product emergency the last couple of weeks, so I was up even later than usual this last 2 weeks. And if it were something that I really didn't believe in, if I were not working on the product, if I were doing that in marketing, for example, oh my God, I'd be so over it. Or if I were traveling to do sales, that eventually gets old. And so making sure that what you're doing and you're spending your time on is the thing that gives you energy, because without that, you are gonna fall apart. And so there's a couple of key things there. One is as you grow, make sure that you surround yourself by people that allow you to spend the right amount of time on the right things. So by way of example, I didn't want to spend time on IT at Relevance. It's an important area, but I didn't want to spend time on it. You know, I wanted one escalation a month and just like manage it. I wanted a very mature leader. And I had a guy reporting to me, super nice guy. We're still friends on Facebook, I think, or at least I'm still friends with him. And we ran into this issue where I was like having to get into this shit about once a week, and I was into the shit of the VP of engineering, VP of product at about the same rate. I just didn't want to be in IT. It didn't add value to where we wanted to go. And so I sat down with him and I was like, you know, here's the situation. He said, okay, cool, we'll change. A month later, I sat down with him again and he said, well, you know, now it's your time to change. Can you meet me in the middle? And I said, I think that's right. I can't. You know, it's been a pleasure working with you. And as great as that guy was, and as good as he might have been for another founder, because I needed to not spend time there, because it was draining me to do it, I needed to get someone else that could. And it's brutal, right? Like that's when I say fit, right? It's not just fit for the company, it's not just fit for the role, it's fit for you and how you need to work and how you need to spend your time, because I wanted to spend time in product. And if I was spending time in IT, I wasn't spending it in product, so I needed someone else. And that's probably one of the hardest lessons I learned, was that even though he's infinitely capable, I'd be a reference for him in the future, I couldn't keep working with him. And you have to build to that scale for yourself.
Good. I have two more quick things for Sally. So to me, you have this incredible perspective on AI, how it's developed from early Amazon days through Deep Sentinel, what you're doing now. This is your chance to tell everybody here something brilliant that's going to surprise us over the next couple years. So when people go back and look at the tape, they'll see you predicted that. Think about the AI space. With your perspective, we all talk about it, we see it every day, we hear about it every day. Is there something coming that might surprise us in the next couple of years?
If I were to pick one thing, and I'm not the first person to say it for God's sake, but I believe it very strongly, it's that the economic ramifications of the commoditization of a whole lot of human work to be automated will create political strife like we've never seen before within the next 5 years.
I wasn't expecting that answer, but that'll give us something to think about the rest of the night. We'll come back to you on that one as things play out. Second thing, you spend what free time you have not building your...
Smoking weed.
Yeah, other than that. Between building, we're not building the company and with your family, we have the benefit of having you as one of our venture partners in our venture fund. You've shared a lot about the thought process of entrepreneurs need to think about, hiring a team, evaluating their market, et cetera, et cetera. Inevitably, I'm assuming most of this audience are early entrepreneurs or aspiring entrepreneurs. They're likely to be in front of us or a group like us, 6 partners with varied experience, pitching their idea for early seed stage funding. what can you tell them off the record to help them in that process when they show up at our offices?
So you're a softie. I'll start with that. No.
It's good and bad cop. We have a little.
I'm an asshole. So if that happens, that's expected. That's true.
Well, let me. I've been in a lot of meetings with
What
you.
can they do to be?
You're not an asshole. You ask hard questions, and you may not do it in a kind way, but it's for the good of the entrepreneur, right? You're not bullshit. But that's exactly the environment that they're going to walk into, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Different partners, different styles. You've done it many times. You've listened to it and invested in companies doing it. What can these guys take away to think about before they walk in that meeting?
So first and foremost is know what VCs, and if you're going for risk capital, right, like understand there's risk capital and there's like small business loan capital. And that spectrum is very, very different. If you are investing, if you're going for VC capital is one in, what are the numbers at early stage, and we walked through this, right? 40% of early stage companies go out of business without raising subsequent capital. They are zeros, right? I write you a check for 100 grand, I don't see a penny of it. 40% return some capital. Probably not everything that you got, but you'll get like some money back. So by the way, you're in the top 60% if you return $5 on your equity. 20% will return significant, and 5% will return the entire fund. Those are the economics these people are dealing with. If you find yourself in that bottom 40%, you also find that they don't give a shit about you. And so that is the environment, that is the ecosystem. That's the deal that you're making when you walk into that office. I'm signing up for those odds. I'm signing up to be part of that equation. I'm signing up for that system. And so when I'm on the other side of that, I'm an investor. I don't give a rat's ass if you have a business that could generate $5 million a year in profit. And to a lot of us, to most of us, like that's a freaking spectacular thing, right? Like I built this thing, it's like a $40 million business, it's generating $5 million a year in profit. Like shit is great, right? We can just split that up every year. They are gonna fire you. They're gonna fire themselves, they're gonna be pissed they invested in your company. They will do everything they can to avoid investing in you in the first place, right? So know that. Know that that's the environment. If you're going after equity and risk capital, you are playing a very different game than what you and I play when we hang out with our friends and we go golfing and we go fishing and we go swimming and we buy $20 toys for our kids at Toys R Us, right? Or used to. I mean, it's just a different thing. That math is not what you and I deal with on an average basis, but it is what they live and it is the only criterion they care about. Number two, in order to get that, they would rather invest in 10 straight up, complete, amoral, piece of shit assholes who have a great chance of becoming that 1 in 10 than they would in a nice guy, nice gal who has a reasonable business and it's growing okay. The assholes are the ones, the like brutal freaking I'm in your face and I don't give a shit what your opinion is, personality is what it takes to create $1 billion company, right? I've spent many nights out late with Travis Kalanick. I've spent many nights out late with Sean Parker, and they're not anything other than that exact stereotype because that's exactly what that system is designed to create. Don't watch Silicon Valley TV show, it breaks my heart. I have never seen it, I can't do it, it's too close to my heart, but it's probably pretty freaking true, right? You've got to be willing to do shit that everyone says is stupid. Because as a founder, we talked about what it took to get funding for Redfin. We got like 70 no's, right? And 1 yes. And then now it's a $2.1 billion company today, right? I mean, so, and it will be a $5 billion company in a year. It's, when you think about the personality that it takes to get that many no's and still keep going, waking up every morning, working 18 hours a day, right? That's not a normal human being. Nobody does that. Nobody wants to do that. And so the persona stereotype of the founder is in that for a reason, and know that that's what they're going to be evaluating against, very honestly, right? And if you look at SV Angel, I really recommend you look at this. SV Angel publishes their criterion of what makes a great founder. The third thing is they're looking for a big market. If you're selling into something where you can make $100 million a year, at some point, that's great, it's a no. But it's 100 million, no. It's 200 million, no. It's 300 million, no. $1 billion plus. And that's the only way that math works out. Because you have to be able to, in those very few companies, return the entire fund. Snapchat, right? Boom, return the fund like 5 times over. Big, big, big freaking deal. Alibaba, Tencent, right? Alibaba returned $70 billion to SoftBank's $500 million investment in 1998. Tencent returned $60 billion, I think $60 billion on a $5 or $10 million investment around the same time frame, right? Those are the economics that drive that entire ecosystem. And if you don't understand that and you don't know that you're playing that game, you are going to lose. You're either going to lose because you're not going to get the money, or you're going to lose because you get the money and you didn't have any idea what the heck you were doing. So it's a little bit of a brutal answer, but like I think the thing that I find most often is people are thinking about their businesses getting to a certain point and getting profitable, and that's neat and it's great and it's cool, but that's not what venture exists for. And you have to know that, and you have to understand that venture is designed to do a very, very specific thing. If you want to do something else, that is phenomenal. By the way, you can get a lot richer doing that. You have higher odds of doing that. That'd be my last thing I'd highlight. You got $2 million sitting in the bank, go buy a fucking gas station. Do not do venture, right? I mean, seriously. If you are looking to make money, you will probably make more money by doing a low risk, high profit services business than you will by doing VC. There are many more entrepreneurs that I know who have tried and failed than those that have even made $1 or $2 or $3 or $5 million out the backside.
That's the reality of the venture world. You're generalizing typically about bigger venture firms, right?
So you guys are nicer?
No, no, not at all. The math is the same, but I guess that may be down the road for an entrepreneur here, right? That when you're running up and down Sand Hill Road, that's absolutely
the evaluation criteria should still be the same. Like you got to know, like if you walk into our offices and you have $100 million potential revenue, like I'm gonna be pounding. After you leave, I will be the one standing on the table, literally standing on the table, saying, "Do not invest." I'm super short, so like I have to stand on the table in order to have an impact. But like, I will be saying no.
No, I think that's exactly the point. Is don't fool yourself that seed capital is necessarily different. Angel capital may be different, not come with the same criteria, but any kind of institutional capital, that decision-making process, the math drives some of the outcome, and everyone should be prepared, whether it's our offices or Sand Hill Road, to understand what you're getting into, which I think is your point and a good one. Anything else? I want to thank again Brandon and his team for organizing this, Zoho for giving the space, Selly for taking time away from Deep Sentinel and family to be here. Hope you appreciate it. I guess we plan on doing this as a fund and with iGate pretty regularly, and Brandon does a great job of communicating that. There are quite a few founders, just like Selly, in this area that we're getting involved with, and we'll look forward to having more events like this to learn from them, ask them questions, and see what they tell you brilliant in a couple years. Thanks, man.
Awesome. Please join me in thanking these guys. So I'm still a little worried about that whole political strife thing with the AI. So since the world's going to go to hell, apparently you should buy a Deep Sentinel security system for your house to keep you protected. A couple quick things. We are going to keep doing more of these types of events. We being iGate, run an event series called the Next Tech Speaker Series, which is a little bit more of a hardware, hard tech, life science bent to it. But mostly it's just really great founders telling stories, so a lot like this. Our next one's going to be November 8th with Serge Saxonoff from 10x Genomics, which is a really interesting company here in Pleasanton. We're going to publish that in the next few days, and we'll send that all out to you guys. The other thing is that we've just, about 2 weeks ago, launched a public Slack community. So if you guys are familiar with Slack, we took our internal Slack community for the incubator that we operate and threw the doors open on that to the public. So it's called Startup TriValley. You can go to our website, igatehub.org, or search Startup TriValley Slack. You can invite yourself to it. We've got about 105 people on that now and love to get more. Just a place to connect and collaborate with the local startup community. Thank you all for coming out tonight. Thank you again to Zoho for hosting us. Hopefully these guys can hang out for a few minutes, although they've got families to get home to. But thanks for coming. Hope you had a good time.